Hi, AP. I wanted to talk a little about Lord of the Flies for our weekly video this week, and I apologize if it seems like I'm just kind of telling you the things I already wrote on here, but some people do better through video. And I will tape another one of these in a couple of days once I finish with the poetry responses to talk about those. So, Lord of the Flies is a novel that is actually taught sometimes to students as low as eighth grade. It is not written on a high syntax scale, meaning that the vocabulary that's in it, aside from some British slang, is not that complex, and the sentence structure is not so complex that you have to have like a really high reading level to understand it. We read it together in AP to study it on a very close reading level. And so, what I'll be doing in class each day is pulling sections out of what you've been assigned to read for us to look at on a paragraph and line by line level, like you would a prose passage or a short story. So, I use this novel to kind of cap off our short story unit because we can look at it for really close text based analysis. And I apologize that right off the bat, you're reading 4 chapters. We lost a week of school this year because of COVID. And so my schedule got a little bit behind, but I feel like if we can just front load that and read a big chunk at the beginning, then we'll be all right. I decided I'd rather do that than leave you with reading to do over fall break. So I apologize for that, but hopefully, like I said, since it's not that complicated, it won't be too terribly much to read, and the rest of them are not that thick. So, material you need to know ahead of time, and if you're already into the book before you watch this, you might still need it explained to you that this book takes place in the 40s or 50s, and it is like an alternate World War II where the war continued and nuclear missiles were brought into play. That's not a huge part of the book. That's just kind of like the situation at the beginning. So, a plane full of boys crashes on a deserted island. Why is there an airplane full of boys with very few adults? Well, they were being evacuated from England to keep them safe. This is something that Londoners did in both World War I and World War II. They would send their children out of the cities because the Germans were bombing the cities. And so they would send them out into the countryside where they would be safer. But so the premise here is that the entire island was unsafe. And so they sent the children off of England. This is like a last resort to protect them. And so then at the beginning of the book, it's really just all about survival. And as the book continues, the obstacles become different. And so at first, there's a lot of man versus nature kind of conflict where the boys are having to learn how to survive. They need things like shelter and food and water. And so they have to figure out how to get those kinds of things. But then other conflicts come into play the longer that they are on the island. And there are 4 main characters that we are going to look at in class together on Wednesday. And that's Ralph, Piggy, Simon, and Jack. So pay attention for those 4 in the beginning. There are other characters that I will also mention. When you're filling out your character list, you need to have those 4. But then you also need Simon and Eric. No, it's not Simon. I'm sorry. Sam and Eric, which they mush their name together and call them Sam and Eric, but they're twins. And so they just kind of use the 2 names to refer to them both because they can't tell them apart. We got a couple of twins in this class, so I'm sure y'all can understand. And then you also need to pay attention for Roger. He is a character that will come up more than once. And he stays in the background, so you don't really notice him for a few chapters, but just when you see the name Roger pop up, pay attention. Other things to pay attention for early in the book is genre. This book fits into 2 different genres pretty neatly. First of all, you might think of the coming of age or Bildungsroman. Here, let me show you how you spell that. It was on some of your summer reading things. So You may have seen it before. That's just the German word for a coming of age novel. So the whole idea with coming of age is that there are trials that a young man has to face between childhood and maturity. And so sometimes it is a physical thing that they have to overcome. And so then sometimes you have like survival trials and that kind of thing. But sometimes coming of age is about maturity. And so like growing up and gaining a new understanding about the world. Sometimes it's about knowledge. And the kind of knowledge that we're talking about here is kind of like the knowledge of good and evil. And so children are innocent and they have a very innocent view of the world, but then adults understand the darker side of being a human. They understand about things like death and violence and sex, and that people are not inherently good and things like that. And so kind of coming to terms with the inner conflict inside of a man and what makes men or people in general good people or bad people. That's all kind of mixed up in the genre of coming of age. And so as you read the book and you're thinking about genre, notice when events occur that seem to change a character's perspective or understanding about humanity or about the world, or pay attention to when a character faces and overcomes a trial. And those are the kinds of things that make this a coming of age novel. Another genre that this fits into is a certain type of dystopian novel that is post-apocalyptic. And so we think of dystopia sometimes as being a broken society or like a society that is inherently flawed. But another side of a dystopian novel is this post-apocalyptic, we have to rebuild the world because something terrible has happened. So there, in most post-apocalyptic books, the world has been destroyed by something like a virus or a war or a meteor or something. And then the people who are left have to create a new society. And so the fact that these boys have crashed onto a deserted island mimics that situation where they are having to create a leadership structure. They're having to create some kind of task distribution. They are going to have to create the elements of society that they need in order to survive, like shelter and finding those survival tactics. They're going to have to fill in roles that adults used to play for them. And so as you're reading, try to notice what the boys are doing to try to create a society. And how is the society they create working? How is it not working? Are there elements of their society that are flawed or problematic? And those things fit within this post-apocalyptic genre. So this isn't an either or. Both of those genres are present. They work together and within the novel to build the conflicts that the boys are facing.